Welcome back. Welcome to Monday's edition. Today we have a lot to do, so we're going to get right into this. I know I didn't give you any work to do over the weekend when we finished up our supply and demand and equilibrium stuff. Today we're going to head right into that. I'll tell you a great news story today as we start out. If you guys think you've had a crazy day, I'm not sure if you saw this, but a gentleman in France, some of his workers pitched in and bought him I don't know if it was a birthday gift or some type of gift, so he could go up into a fighter jet. And when he got there, he was wearing an Apple Watch, so they could actually monitor his heart rate. And I guess it was off the chart. And the fighter jet started going up. It got about 2,500 feet and it was going straight up. And he panicked. And so he grabbed something just to hang on to. And unfortunately, it was the ejector button. And he was ejected. His helmet wasn't on correctly, so the helmet went flying. And so he ends up coming out of the airplane. And luckily, was okay and came down in a parachute and all that. But I'm assuming that was a little more chaotic than your day. To all the gentlemen who are watching out there, so evidently there's a big rage right now growing mustaches or full beards, but I'm pretty sure mustaches are the thing. Don't let your mothers or your girlfriends tell you it looks terrible. It looks spectacular. So maybe at the end, as we finish up this course, maybe I'll have you guys send me, what your images look like here if you're able to do it. I know a lot of college students are doing this now, where they're just letting all their facial hair grow out. I support it. I'm all in favor. All right, let's go to some elasticity of demand, elasticity of supply. Once again, we are on the docket here. My name is Matt Pedlow. I teach up in Michigan. We have about 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts today. So if by any chance I just stop talking, well, you know what happened. The tree fell on the power, I guess. So today we're doing units 2.3 and 2.4. That's why we have a lot to do. And then tomorrow we're going to finish up with the other measures of elasticity. And tomorrow I'm going to walk you guys through and do, I think, 3 free response with you tomorrow. So make sure you guys have some, like I always say, make sure you guys have something to draw with today, a notebook, go through these graphs, that kind of thing. So price elasticity demand, what does this mean? Well, there's an easy way to think about it, right? In class, I used to always show them a rubber band. And I would say, think about like a line of people standing in line. And they're in line to get okay, they don't care what soda, either Coke or Pepsi, they could care less. And there's 100 people in line, right? And that line, the rubber band represents that line. And all of a sudden the price increases of Pepsi. It goes from $1 to $2. What would happen, right? All of a sudden the people would leave the line. They would go get a Coke instead, okay? So it's stretchy, or what we call elastic. If you had, and this is not a joke, but if you had 100 diabetics standing in line, right? And all of a sudden the price went up, what would happen? Well, not a whole lot. It wouldn't stretch much. Maybe 1 or 2 people would hop out of line, but most people would not. If you're a diabetic, you need the insulin. So if you had insulin and the price went up, it's inelastic. Notice that rubber band is not stretching. So if you can remember that as we move forward here, the price elasticity of demand is simply the measure of responsiveness to the quantity demanded is to changes in price. So let's go all the way back to Thursday. And I told you the law of demand is that price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. Is that always true? Well, for the most part, yes, but how much? So if the price of pencils increases, the quantity demanded might fall quite a bit, unless, of course, you had the LSATs that day and you were at a pencil store and you needed them, things like that. So normally, though, why? Because you can just buy a pen instead. Okay, so if I told you the price of insulin increase, what would happen? Well, the quantity demanded might fall, but not by a lot. Okay, there would be. I mean, there are people who say like things like electricity, that if the price increased, people would still buy it. No, they wouldn't. They would light candles. There's a certain level where people are not going to pay for things. So the formula, now we got some math coming. Good news, not too difficult math. So we'll show you how to do this math today. And the formula you guys need to know, and I will tell you right now, elasticity is a big part of this exam. They've had free response in the last few years that are just a lot of elasticity. They've had a lot of multiple choice questions. Yes, I'm fully aware that we have 2 free response, but they could certainly ask you about elasticity of demand and supply. So it's the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. It's always quantity over price, or money, in this case, income tomorrow. So the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. And I have up here alcohol and tobacco. And why is that? Well, let's think about what the government does. The government tries to raise revenue. How does the government raise revenue? By taxing us. If they taxed soda, Would they raise a lot of money? I don't know. You have people like me who don't drink soda. You have people who might drink 2 Mountain Dews every day. Those people might get some money. What the government tries to do is they try and tax goods where if they tax it and the price increases, people still buy the good. And you think about alcohol and tobacco, there's a reason I use this. What do they call those taxes? They call those sin taxes. And why? Because the idea is sinning, using tobacco and alcohol, people will still buy the good even if the price goes up a little bit and the government can raise revenue. What's the other thing they tax? Gas. Why is that? We need gasoline unless you have a Tesla. So the government, a lot of times, when they're trying to set up tax things, they try and tax goods that we will still buy even at higher prices. Okay, so let's talk about today. We're going to get into the math here in just a second. Let's talk about the determinants of how elastic or inelastic demand will be. This is not something you need to memorize for the AP test. I can't possibly imagine it's going to be a free response that says, give me all 4 of the determinants, something like that, right? But this is more kind of common sensey. So the first one is the availability of substitutes. This is the main one when we talk about this. If there are many substitutes, demand is elastic. So let's say I decide to go down to the local store and I want to buy a Kit Kat. And every candy bar is normally 99 cents. And I get down there, but for some reason, the price of Kit Kats has gone up. And now it's $1.50. What do? I just buy a Three Musketeer instead, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea what's similar to a Kit Kat. Maybe a Twix bar, okay? So if there are many substitutes, demand is elastic. If there aren't a lot of substitutes at all, like gas, unless you have an electric car, most people aren't using biofuels, taking the grease from McDonald's. So therefore, if the price of gasoline goes up, what do? We have to continue getting to work and buying gasoline. So that would be inelastic. That's primary. Number one is key to understand that if there are a lot of substitutes, demand is going to be more elastic. If there aren't, demand is going to be less elastic. Number 2, necessities versus luxuries. Okay, if the good is considered a luxury, sorry, my chair is super squeaky, I realize that back here, then demand will be considered elastic. So if the price of milk, people consider milk a necessity, or bread, eggs, things of that nature. If the price goes up, people probably still buy the good. If I'm looking to buy a fur coat, which I'm not, but if I was, and the price went up, I would say, I'll buy it later. So that's a big part of it, right? Once again, we go back to toilet paper in these times, right? Toilet paper is considered a necessity by most people. And if the price goes up, people probably still buy the good. A luxury watch, like a Rolex, maybe they don't, right? Maybe the price goes up and people decide not to buy it as much. So if there are a lot of substitutes, demand is more elastic. If it's considered a luxury, demand is more elastic. Number 3 kind of goes along with what we just talked about, the percentage of budget. So the larger the percentage of your total budget, the more elastic demand will be. The example I always use is, let's say that I was a first-year teacher. I'm teaching in the South. I am making $24,000 a year, okay? And I'm living in a town, and I go to a town, and I need a couple gallons of milk. Now you can say, really, is that taking a big part of your budget? Well, yeah. Let's say I'm shopping next to Oprah. Okay? Oprah has a little bit more money than I do. And Oprah, the price of milk goes up. As a percentage of her budget, that price increase is minuscule. She still has $1 billion, where I might only have X amount of dollars left. So the larger the percentage of my total budget is, the more elastic the demand will be. So buying milk, buying that BMW, it's a huge part of my budget. If the price of it goes up, I don't buy it, right? So think about this. It's common sensey, but if I'm buying cheaper goods and the price goes up, it's not impacting me the same as if I had my heart set on buying this beautiful 5 Series and I go to the store and I finally save the money and the price goes up 10%. Now I don't buy it. It's way too much of my budget. The milk, 10% increase, whatever, so I buy it. And last but not least, time. And this is an important one to understand. So right now, let's go back to the example I used when I talked about, this is from last week, and I said, if you guys had automobiles and you paid for your own gasoline, and I went through the parking lot of most of your high schools, and I looked at your gas tanks, and I wanted to see how much gasoline was in each gas tank. You're paying for your own gas. Most of you are probably less than 1/8 of a tank. Okay, so if the price went up, what do people do? Well, the quantity still increases. But if the price over a time period, if you have time to adjust for that, demand will be much more elastic. Price goes up, now people don't buy it. How so? Maybe they would carpool. Maybe, I know you seniors out here are thinking probably never, but maybe you guys would take the bus. Or, and if you're in a city, you're probably like, of course we take, the bus or the subway to get to school. But if you're in rural towns, most seniors are probably driving themselves. You could ride a bike, you could walk. There are all these things that you could do. So the longer you have to adjust these price changes, the more elastic the demand is. Okay, so understand the idea. If there's a lot of substitutes, if it's a luxury, if it's a big part of your budget, if you have a long time, these are all things that make the demand more elastic. So let's talk about this real quick. Which of these goods has the most elastic? Which one of these goods has the most inelastic? You have I have no idea what that is. We're going to call it a green, I think this is a word, matcha, frappuccino with some whipped cream on top. Then you have a just black coffee, and then you have a cappuccino. Okay, so which one of these has the most elastic demand? Well, let's answer that by asking a different question. Which one has the most inelastic demand? And that would be the black coffee, right? People who drink coffee, myself, first thing they do when they get up is make coffee for themselves. Which one would have the most elastic demand? Well, it's between the frappuccino and the cappuccino here. And some people could argue they're the same, but I wouldn't. I would say the cappuccino would be right around the middle. That if the price goes up, maybe I'll get a flat white, but maybe I really like cappuccinos where if you're getting this and it's got some mocha in it, and I have no idea what else. Sometimes you guys order at Starbucks, it's like a foreign language. This would be the most elastic demand. Why? Because if the price went up, maybe you'd get it without whipped cream, or maybe you'd get it without the green tea, or maybe you'd get it without, right? So the more kind of substitutes you could do all kinds of things, the more elastic the demand would. Black coffee, there is no substitute. What, am I going to chew coffee beans? Probably not. So the demand for that would be more inelastic. And let's talk now about what this means. All right, so I told you you didn't necessarily have to memorize this. This you do. You absolutely have to know for your AP test coming up the value of elasticity of demand. So we're going to start with inelastic demand, which is when the quantity of demand doesn't respond strongly to changes in price. So the key is it will be less than 1. And these are absolute values we're getting. So if you're getting a negative, don't worry about that. We want to know what the number is. The negatives are going to be important tomorrow. So when you say like at 0.2, right, that would be highly inelastic. So something like salt, right? The Romans used to pay their soldiers in salt. They called them salar, or the Roman word for salt. So that's where you get the term salary. You're being paid. And it was, people always say, well, why was it so important? Well, it wasn't just for taste, it preserved food, right? So cured meats are, you're covering them in salt and it's cooking the meat when the salt breaks down. So it was very valuable back then to preserve things. That's the demand for salt back then, highly inelastic. But today the demand for chocolate chip ice cream, fairly elastic. If the price goes up, you just buy a different kind of ice cream, right? Chocolate, peanut butter, everyone knows that's the best ice cream anyways. So inelastic demand is less than 1. The elastic demand is when the quantity demanded responds more strongly to changes of price, greater than 1. And the further you get away from 1, so if you start getting up at 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're going to see why here in a second, the demand is very elastic. Now, some of you wonder like, gosh, I'm taking econ and thinking about majoring in it. Good call on your part. What could I do with an econ major? Well, think about you get hired by a sports team. Okay, let's say you get hired by the Kansas City Chiefs, and they want to know, we got a good team. People are paying a lot of money to see us play. Should we raise ticket prices? So what they want to know is they need a forecaster. That's where you come into play. Because if they say, look, we can raise prices 20%, people are still going to pay. That's not true. The law of demand tells us that is not true, but some people might still pay for higher ticket prices. And your job as the economist on staff would be figure out the elasticity of demand. So when they raise the prices, what's going to happen to total revenue? Are they going to make more money? They're going to make less money. And so that would be your job. You'd have to figure this out. And I'm going to show you the math to do that. Unit elastic, quantity demanded changes by the same percentage. So the elasticity demand equals 1. So what that simply means is if they raise prices by 10%, the quantity demanded is going to change by 10% as well, okay? So unit elastic, I'm going to show you on the demand curve where this falls. You're not going to see a ton of this, but it's simply, right, if you raise price 10% and 10% change, you raise price 20%, 20% change in quantity. It'd always be one. And then perfectly elastic, which we're going to show you these curves here in a second, quantity demand, it changes infinitely with a change in price. So what do you think a perfectly elastic demand curve looks like? Right? Perfectly elastic. Going back to our firm graphs, which I'm going to help you guys and do some review over the next week and a half about firm graphs because we have 2 more weeks, right? And then we're going to do a little bit of a review in May, which you guys are going to really like. The College Board is putting some great stuff together here for the first week right before the AP tests start. And perfectly elastic, what does that mean? The demand, we'll demand as much as possible at that price, but if you raise the price even a penny, we won't demand any. And a good example, that would be like our commodity prices, where let's say you're Jiffy Mix and you're making cornmeal or corn mix, right, to make corn muffins. They're buying all the corn they want at whatever price has been set on the market at the Chicago Board of Trade. They're not paying any more. Why? Because why would they? If you can get 1 million bushels of corn for $3.18 a bushel, then why would you pay $3.19? You wouldn't. You can get all the corn at $3.18. So that's perfectly elastic. And then perfectly inelastic, when the quantity demanded does not change with price changes, then that's when if you did the math, it would be elasticity of 0. Okay, so the quantity demanded, there is no change. So it'd be 0 divided by something. So it's 0. Okay, know these numbers. If you guys have to watch, if you're watching this later, you have to go back and pause this slide and make sure you understand this. It's vitally important as we move forward with elasticity stuff, especially tomorrow, that this math is really quick and the formulas you just understand. So there's our elasticity demand. Let's look at some of this on the graph. But before we do that, let's make it easy on you guys. Let's talk about the total revenue test. This is the back door to figure out. It's the shortcut. It's the easy way for those of you who don't want to figure out percentages. So if the arrows go together, then demand is inelastic. What do I mean by that? If you raise a price and your total revenue increases, demand is inelastic. I raise the price of insulin, people still need to buy it. I will make more revenue, more money. Think about it. What did they call the guy? The farmer bro there, the guy who was trying to raise the price of EpiPens, right? To like $750 or something like that, or 750%, whatever he did. It was a crazy number. And what happened? People need EpiPens. If your kid is allergic to peanuts or bees, you're not going to send your kindergartner off to school and say, hey, hopefully you can avoid bees today. So people would still buy them. And what he realized, the demand is so inelastic. Now, from an ethical standpoint, good Lord, right? What is he doing? Which is why he went to trial. But if you raise a price and demand is inelastic, you're going to make more total revenue. If you lower the price of insulin, what happens to total revenue? So you have someone like me, I'm not diabetic, I don't buy insulin. If you lower the price, would I jump at the market? Probably not. Therefore, if you lower the price, total revenue falls. So the arrows go together, it's inelastic. If the arrows go opposite each other, then demand is elastic. So if you raise the price of tickets to see the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe the demand is inelastic. Maybe people still go up. What if you raise the price for the New York Jets and maybe people don't go see them and maybe the demand is elastic, so your total revenue falls, okay? And demand is elastic if you lower the price and people rush out to buy the good, okay? So we just said that if you lower the price of insulin, people don't go out buy it. But what if Pepsi had a sale on Gatorade? Pepsi owns Gatorade. So what if they went out and, well, they own Quaker Oats, it's on Gatorade, but whatever. So what if Pepsi lowered the price on Gatorade and people said, I'm going to go stock up on Gatorade, and Gatorade made more total revenue, okay? So simply total revenue, price times quantity, right? I think we all got that so far. This chart right here, sweet God, know this thing. Over and over, questions on this. So if you draw your graphs, notice that when things start looking more vertical, that means that things are more inelastic, the demand or the supply. When things start looking more horizontal, the demand or supply is more elastic, okay? And why is this? Well, look, right here, okay? So if we just show you guys this stuff, if you lower the price, look what happens. There's a very small change in quantity right here. But if demand is elastic, you lower the price, look at the amount of quantity. So I lower price, demand's inelastic, very few people jump into the market to buy the good. When the demand is elastic, I lower the price, bam, people rush out and start buying the good, okay? Perfectly inelastic is going to be a vertical line, right? Demand is, so kids always ask, right? Are there really real world examples when you use the word perfectly? Well, yes and no. Some people claim no, but sure. I mean, the commodities markets for demand perfectly elastic over here, like I told you, right? When the price of corn is set, you can buy as much of the corn as you want. You can just keep buying the contracts for that. What about here? Okay, there's one close one. How about a life-sustaining pill, where you go down and you're having a heart attack and someone stands next to you and says, I have good news and bad news. I'm holding a pill. If you put this on your tongue in 2 seconds, your heart attack stops, you're going to be healthy. You won't have a heart attack. The bad news is the price went up, 30% yesterday. Most people wouldn't say, oh, it's too expensive, let me go. Most people would take the pill and worry about it later. Is that a great example? No, because theoretically there are people who would say, it's too expensive, whatever. But for the most part, no matter what the price is, the quantity wouldn't change. People would still buy. Okay, that quantity is going to buy it no matter what. So not a lot of real life examples. And then it's important to also know, kids always ask this question, the math kids that come straight out of their math classes and say, hey, we do a lot of things with slope. Is elasticity slope? No. Elasticity changes, okay? Depending on the range of where it is. So the elastic range is in lower quantities, the left part of your demand curve, and then unit elastic right here in the middle, and then inelastic towards the bottom, okay? And yes, this should have a D right there for demand. So as your demand curve falls, it's elastic at the higher prices. That should make sense. At higher prices, the price increase is going to be a pretty big, so people don't buy it. At lower prices, we still buy the good. Price increase doesn't dramatically affect us that much. So demand is more elastic at lower quantities, okay, and more inelastic at higher quantities down here or at lower prices. And yes, they could ask you about this as well. But for some of you guys, this is straight review and you're getting all this. So let's go through a couple questions. This is one of the most missed questions I've seen over the last couple of years. And we'll talk about why. So City Transit Authority increases the price of subway and bus tickets from $1.25 to $1.50. If demand for these tickets is inelastic, the number of people riding buses and subways and the revenues will change which ways. Let's chunk this in two. Let's take the first half of this. What's going to happen to the number of people riding buses and subways if the demand is inelastic? Okay, the law of demand. As price increases, quantity decreases. It has to be the number of people riding is going to decrease. What kids automatically do, part of it's test fatigue, they're banging through these multiple choice questions and boom, 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 but they don't think, and they think themselves, well, it's inelastic, people still buy it. No, if that price increased from $1.25 to $1.50, there are some people who say, I'm not buying it now, and maybe I'll walk. So the number of people riding is going to decrease. So you're between B, C, and D. And if the demand is price inelastic and the price increases, so price increases, total revenue, if it's inelastic, remember they go together, so the revenues would increase. So it's B. So hopefully you get that. People, right? The number of people riding buses is going to decrease. Some people are not going to pay the higher prices, but because the demand is inelastic, if price goes up, total revenue goes up. All right. B. Number two, assume the demand for bottled water is relatively elastic. Okay, so go ahead, take a second, read through this one. Okay, increase in the supply of bottled water. So now it's a two-parter. So we know the demand is relatively elastic. So we know what that means. As price increases, total revenue falls. And if price falls, total revenue increases. So the total revenue test. So an increase in the supply of bottled water. So let's think about supply and demand. If supply increases, we showed you this on Friday, what happens to price? Price falls. And if demand is elastic, if price falls, total revenue increases. So increase in supply causes price to fall, total revenue will, price falls, here we are, meaning total revenue will increase. That's what demand is elastic. Price falls, total revenues go up, demand is elastic. And then last but not least for demand here, assume the price of a good decreases from 10 to 9 and the quantity demanded of the good increases from 25 to 30. Okay, ready? There's two ways you can do this. So here we go. I'm going to draw it on your, so remember the elasticity demand. Okay, it's a percentage change in quantity demanded. So what is the percentage change in quantity demanded? You went from 25 to 30. So how do you do this, right? You guys, you can subtract and divide by the base, right? Most of you math kids get this pretty easy. I know some of you are looking at this and saying, well, if it was 25 originally, went up 5, that's an increase of 20%. Okay, so it's a 20% change. And if the price change from 10 to 9, so it was at 10 and fell $1 or 10%, so that's 10%. So that means the elasticity demand is 2. Okay, that's step number 1. Step number 2, what does that mean? It means demand is elastic, anything greater than 1. So, or you could do the total revenue test, that at the price of $10, 10 times 25 is 250, and then 9 times 30 is 270. So it went from 250 to 270 when the price fell. So price fell, total revenue increased, demand is elastic. So either way gets you the same answer. Just depends on how much math you feel like doing. Okay, that's it for demand. Hopefully in the last 25 minutes, you've understood exactly what you have to know with demand. Let's talk about supply here for a moment. So the price elasticity supply, good news, it should look very similar. It is a percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. So same idea. And once again, if the value is greater than 1, supply is elastic, less than 1, oops, sorry. And less than 1, that is wrong. Let's fix that. Hold on. Sorry for that. Sorry, you guys. Let's go back to that. I know I've lost you for a sec. We need to change that because I don't want anyone to write the wrong thing down. There we go. All right, we're back at it now. My apologies. Here we are. Okay. So if it's greater than 1, it's elastic. Less than 1, it's inelastic. So same thing. And supply is kind of fun to talk about because, right, kids, a lot of times when you're in class and you guys learn, even in the college level, a lot of students struggle with the idea of supply because they aren't trained to think like producers, right? We're just consumers at this point in our lives. So demand makes sense. When I say the price changes, I think, what would I do in that situation? A lot of us have a hard time thinking, what would a business do? But that's why this is kind of fun to talk about. So same formula, just quantity supplied. So let's talk about the determinants. Good news is it's a little easier to think about this. So it's basically how fast can you get your product out in the marketplace? So what we call the ease and speed of doing this. Okay. So beachfront land. People like, a lot of college professors will use the example of beachfront land is a perfectly inelastic supply. So here you have, right, Isle of Palms down outside of Charleston, and you have all this land. Okay, is this beachfront? Sure, you could put a house maybe there, maybe there, but really there's no beachfront land. You can't just like have put a parking garage here and fill it up with sand and have a second layer of beachfront sand. So in essence, the supply looks like this. The quantity is set, so the price is what's going to change, not the quantity. It's not like a normal supply curve where more quantity at higher prices. Now, I've always used this for an example, and then of course Dubai had to come around and ruin this example, because what did Dubai say? Wait, you're telling us that the supply of beachfront land is perfectly inelastic? Well, we'll just build more beachfront land. And people said, well, you can't, right? I just told you can't. And they said, well, we can. And so they built the Palms, the world where you can buy these islands, right? This is supposed to have like a little shopping mall on it and stuff, and pretty deserted. Not a lot of people live out here. A lot of money from around the world buys these areas. But in essence, yes, the supply of land is perfectly inelastic. Okay, how easy can you get new supply out in the marketplace? Well, in terms of beachfront land, you can't. That's number one. And supply of Jiffy Mix, relatively elastic, almost perfectly elastic. Why is that? Because if they said we need more Jiffy Mix supplied, what do? Well, maybe right now they're closed on Saturday and Sunday, so maybe they just open on Saturday and Sunday. Just keep supplying more at the same price they're supplying at right now. They can just keep supplying this. Okay. So good old Jiffy. Number two, time. This is a very important thing to understand when we're talking about supply. We talked about this with demand. So the longer producers have to adjust to price changes, the more elastic the supply is. So think about oil, okay? So craziness. We keep talking about this oil thing. What they do over the weekend, right? They're on a conference call and they agree to cut production by 9.7, I think, 9.8 million barrels per day. So you hear that. What does that mean? It means gas prices are going to start going up. Most of you will probably notice you go to the gas station, it's probably 10 cents more expensive, 20 cents more expensive today than it was perhaps Friday. It's remarkable how fast they raise those. But what they're doing is restricting the supply of oil to drive the prices up. And the US is in on this too because we're being so harmed domestically because we produce so much oil. In the short run, the supply of oil is very inelastic, right? We can't immediately just pump more oil at high prices. But in the long run, sure you can. You just put more rigs out in the water, in the Gulf, out west, more fracking, more horizontal drilling. You Oklahoma and Texas kids know exactly what we're talking about here, right? It's very quick. It's very, in the long run, you can get all that immediately, but in the short run, you can't. You're stuck. I can't just blink and have new rigs just start drilling tomorrow, right? It takes time to get all that set up. So time, the longer you have, the more elastic supply is. Once again, as price increases, not a huge change in quantity. The price of oil increases, perhaps we get some more oil out in the market, perhaps, but it's really hard in the short run. But look at the elastic supply, price increases, and look what happens, a massive change in the quantity, okay? That would be more elastic supply. So it's the same thing as before. When things look more vertical, the demand or supply are more inelastic. When things start getting more and more horizontal, the supply and demand get more elastic. So hopefully this makes sense. I know I've thrown a lot at you guys today, but it's important. They've really harped on this over the last few years. Matter of fact, if you look back just a couple of years ago, one of the free responses was pretty much all elasticity. You had to know your formulas, you had to know how to do your math, and you had to know what we're going to talk about tomorrow when we get to the cross price and income elasticity. So perfectly elastic supply, perfectly inelastic supply. So perfectly elastic supply, yeah, there's some examples, kind of like Jiffy keeps applying it. I like talking about the perfectly inelastic supply here. A good example would be like, if you guys know what this is a Rothko painting. I know what you're going to say. People honestly spend $40 million. Well, no, they spend $60 to $70 million for that. Hold on, before you say, why I could do that. Well, you didn't. Mark Rothko did, and so that's why, blah, blah, blah. But yes, you go to any modern art museum, go to MoMA, go anywhere, go to Chicago, they all, right? University of Nebraska, their art gallery has a Rothko in it. And yes, these are millions and millions of dollars. But that one right there, okay, I don't know what number this is. That's the only one he did just like this, meaning it has perfectly inelastic supply. You can't reproduce more Rothkos because he's not alive anymore. So this one right here as a quantity looks just like this. And so as demand changes, it's just price, which is why art auctions are fascinating to look at. Because when times are good and a lot of foreigners enter that art auction, it drives prices up. Why is that? Because there's only one of a kind. So as demand changes, you're going to see increases in price. If demand starts falling, if people are like, you know what we don't like anymore? We don't like modern art. We don't want any Rothkos and any Jackson Pollocks, any Warhols. We're looking only at the Impressionist period now. All of a sudden, as demand falls, price begins falling, okay? Perfectly inelastic supply. So that should make some sense to you guys. So here's what we're going to do. Good time to finish up here today, right? On a windy Monday. So I want you guys to take a couple minutes, go through this with you. It's the first thing we're going to go over tomorrow. And then I'm going to actually do a couple review multiple choice tomorrow, which we haven't done. We usually review free response. I want to make sure you're up on your elasticity. It really is an important concept when you get down to this. So the table below is showing the quantity demanded of good X, okay, at different prices, right? This should make sense as the price increases, right? The price is going from 10 to 30, the quantity demanded is falling from 4 to 1. So is the demand for good X relatively elastic, relatively inelastic, unit perfectly or perfectly? But here's the important part. This is what you guys are really going to see on this AP test. Because you're not going to have to draw graphs, this word is going to be so important. You guys are going to have to explain things. Hopefully watching these videos, you're getting an understanding of what you would use when they say explain. So just saying because the math works is not explaining. And if they say show your work, then they do want to see some math. But the good news is total revenue test is fine. doing price times quantity, saying as a price increase, my total revenue did this. That's showing your work, right? So is the supply, all those, and then this will be figure out who's really a high flyer at this point in the course, because now they're going to ask, if you put a per unit tax, how will the burden of the tax be distributed between the buyers of the good and the sellers of the good? This goes all the way back to what I started talking about when I was talking about the sin taxes. Who pays the majority of those taxes? Well, if the demand is more elastic, meaning you raise the price, I don't buy it, you already know who's going to pay the tax on that. It's not me. If you raise the price of chewing gum because you put a tax on it, right? Singapore, gum used to be illegal, believe it or not. Now it's legal. You just can't buy it there. I think the laws changed where you can, or maybe you can't. No, I think you can bring it in. You can be chewing gum when you land, something like that. Before you couldn't have any gum. And people always think that's a really stupid idea. But the next time you're on a subway or the next time you're in school, put your hand under the desk, right? There's always gum everywhere. It's disgusting. People step in gum, and they were smart enough to realize, like, we don't pay for this. So if you put a tax on chewing gum, no one will buy it, right? I'll just buy like a piece of candy instead type thing. So the supply, or excuse me, the demand is inelastic. So something like cigarettes, like I talked about, if I smoke a pack a day, which I don't, but if I was a smoker and every day the first thing I did when I woke up was smoked, and you raise the tax on that, who's going to pay for that? That's what they want to know. So even though we haven't done tax graphs, we're going to go, I think, on Thursday, you guys can answer this just using kind of rational common sense. So get this done. We're going to go over it tomorrow. First thing, I will see you guys again at 3 o'clock. I hope all of you, especially down south, you had some bad storms. Hope everyone is safe and healthy. And once again, we're doing everything we can to deploy internet, get everyone ready to go for this test, which on my countdown, if I have April 13th today, you're talking about 5 weeks. So not a lot of time. And let me give you some advice to finish off today. Look, you guys have spent, some of you a semester, some a trimester, some of you the entire year. Now is not the time to not push yourselves to get college credit for this stuff. You've put all this time into it. My class was 97.2% done in my best estimation of micro and macro. And I told my students, don't lose incentive. All the incentive in the world. Next fall, you seniors are in college. For you juniors in a couple years, you can get this done, which frees up some things. It allows you maybe to go abroad and take 4 classes. It allows you to change majors, right? What do they say? 85% of people change a major more than once. And I mean, that's a staggering thing. If you guys get these AP credits done, look, it frees up some play while you're in college. So now if you do change a major, that's okay. I don't need to take a 5th year. So that's my PSA to you. Make sure you have internet and make sure you guys take this test and do well on it. So once again, thank you as always for watching. I certainly hope you will join again tomorrow. Finish up that practice question. We're going to go over it tomorrow first thing. And you guys have a fine afternoon. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.